Gold Bug by Noel Osualdini. John Leggett stood on the roadside surveying the for sale signs. His first big success had been right on this street, little more than a shell. Yet he'd managed to turn a profit, selling the property off to some dupe, and that had led him into a successful 30-year career as a real estate agent. He was a wealthy, successful man. But there was always room in his bank account for more, especially at this time of year. He watched the cars arriving and departing, small children in Christmas finery running up driveways with new toys or brandishing gifts for grandparents. A time for giving, a time for receiving, a time for greed. There was a loud ding behind him, and he jumped out of the way of some brat on a new 3-speed, and then had to avoid another on a skateboard. He fingered the business cards in his jacket, ignoring the laughter, and dropped a brochure into a letterbox. See what your property's worth. No strings. Of course there were strings. There was no such thing as a free evaluation. And some sellers might not even be able to afford a comparable house after he'd sold theirs and taken his commission. Not his problem, he told himself. A little girl on the path said, "Merry Christmas, mister," and waved her doll before him. But she didn't wait for his patronising smile. "Go home and tell your mummy that you met the Grinch on the street," he laughed inwardly. A few steps farther on, she broke into, "You'd better watch out, you'd better not cry." Today, with crowds of children about, and grandparents coming out of houses to greet their visiting families, with people packing cars to go visiting themselves, wouldn't be the day to make deals, he told himself. Unless... He found himself in front of number 7. The last property of its size on this street, number 7 had evaded him for years. The occupants always had displays out this time of year, though he could never remember seeing young children or anyone in the front yard. This year an animatronic Santa greeted him at the gate with bows and recorded, "Merry Christmas, ho ho ho!" The Santa robot was holding a screen in its hand, which flashed "Naughty" as Leggett approached. Peering about, he almost walked into a life-sized angel half hidden under a tree. The angel's lips were pursed, as if in warning. Doom, it was saying. Leggett stepped around it, avoiding a string of Christmas lights. He sniffed deeply the sweet wafts of baking treats and sugary delicacies from surrounding houses, and thought he could smell, under it all, the scent of money. "Look, Mum, it's Rudolph," said a child's voice, and Leggett barely avoided walking into a fiberglass reindeer with a blood-red nose. He knocked at the door, but after a few minutes of waiting, he turned to find himself facing another animatronic, this one in a red dress. Mrs. Claus, he realised, as he brushed past towards a side gate. A squeak of gears and a voice brought his eyes back to her. Mrs. Claus had a kindly, almost pitying face, and she said, "You better watch out." That's what the kid on the street was singing, he remembered. Odd. "Bah, humbug," he grumbled, waving a hand at the ridiculous warning. He pushed open the gate, slipped down a gap between the house and the paling fence. While the owners weren't around, he'd check out the muddy backyard and, oh my, yes, so much empty dirt that there'd be room for quite a development here. Tear down the trees, get rid of that cubby house. He imagined himself building tiers of tiny flats and raking in rent from tenants for the rest of his life. Clouds parted overhead momentarily, and a ray of sunshine turned a mud patch into a burnished pool of gold. As he rubbed his eyes and got closer, as he dismissed his own doubts, he realised that that was exactly what it looked like. Molten gold. No wonder these people had never sold. They had a pool of gold in their own backyard. He could see something bubbling in its centre. Liquid gold must be draining into the pond from somewhere. He didn't know the melting temperature of gold, but it must be hot. If he could just dip something into that pond, perhaps a pen or a rolled newspaper, or even his briefcase, he'd have a fortune when the metal solidified. He crept closer, but he almost tripped on something hidden in the grass, a golden thread leading to the pool. Even this gossamer fibre must be worth something. He made a mental note to pluck a piece up to take with him. Another golden line, thickening as it neared the edge, caught his foot. For some reason he was reminded of a trapdoor spider's trip line. But the pool beckoned, and he pushed the thought away. He must see, make absolutely certain, then return in a few days with a generous offer for an outright purchase. He adjusted his glasses on his nose. He was going to have a great Christmas. A very Merry Christmas indeed. Another line of gold glinted in the grass. He felt tears in his eyes. Then another strand and another, converging. The criss-crossing lines caught his foot, and he stumbled. He pulled hard and lost a shoe. He cursed softly and returned his eyes to the pond of gold. The golden liquid reflected in his glasses erupted without warning, and before he could react, something burst from the pool, something with multiple eyes and legs. He stared in disbelief, tilting his head as it rose, its golden fangs dripping burnished wealth. He was wondering how he could rid himself of this beast and claim the golden pool as his prize, even as it towered above him, even as hard, cold fangs pierced his flesh. Out on the front footpath and in front yards, along the street, adults shook hands and hugged. Children laughed, grandparents beamed, reindeer danced, and Santas seemed to take in a breath, while John Leggett, wealthy real estate agent and developer, was stabbed and immobilized, wrapped in golden threads, and dragged down into the pool to meet the fate that the angel had predicted.